Good morning and welcome back. I need you to hear something today because what I'm about to share isn't theory and it isn't opinion. It's information that could genuinely redirect the next decade of your life, starting this week. I'm Dr. Marcus, and on this channel, we take current research in longevity and senior health and turn it into something you can actually do. I've spent over 20 years in geriatric medicine, working with thousands of patients between 60 and 90, and I've watched the same pattern repeat itself. Good people, smart people, doing ordinary things every single day that were quietly taking away their strength, their clarity, and their freedom. Almost none of them had ever been told to stop. Today, we're going to change that. Research following older adults over time has consistently found something encouraging. People who change even a handful of daily habits, not everything, just a few specific ones, tend to show meaningfully slower physical decline and better reported quality of life than those who don't. Even when those changes start well after 65, it is genuinely never too late. I want that to sit with you before we go any further. I want to speak to you directly for a moment. I know who's watching this. You're someone who's noticed small shifts, maybe more stiffness in the morning, maybe a bit more fog in the afternoon. Maybe the energy you used to count on isn't showing up the way it did 5 years ago, and that's been sitting quietly in the back of your mind. I see you, and I want you to know, almost everything I just described can be changed. These aren't fixed outcomes, they're signals, and signals can be answered. Before we begin, the number one item on today's list is something nearly every senior in this country does inside their own home, every day, all year long. What the research shows about its effect on your metabolism, your heart, and your brain is going to surprise you. Stay with me, because number one is genuinely not what you'd expect. And before we start, drop your age in the comments and tell me one change you've made this year that you're proud of. I read every comment on this channel, and it genuinely shapes what I make next. Now, counting down from 7 to 1. Important to essential. This one's deeply embedded in an entire generation's understanding of healthy eating, and I understand why. For decades, the advice was that fat was the enemy. Low-fat yogurt, fat-free dressing, skim milk, you followed it. But the science has moved significantly since then, and what we now understand about fat and the aging brain changes the picture. Your brain is roughly 60% fat by dry weight. The myelin sheaths insulating your nerve fibers, which let electrical signals travel efficiently, are made almost entirely of fatty acids. When you cut healthy fats after 60, you're removing raw material your brain genuinely needs to maintain those connections. Researchers studying nutrition and cognitive aging have found that older adults who eat diets richer in monounsaturated and omega-3 fatty acids tend to show slower rates of decline in the hippocampus, the brain region most responsible for forming new memories, and one of the first areas affected in early cognitive decline. Here's the part that concerns me most as a physician, though. When seniors cut fat, they very often replace it with refined carbohydrates, white bread, crackers, low-fat cookies, and those spike blood sugar, drive insulin resistance, and feed a cycle of low-grade inflammation that accelerates aging at nearly every level. I've had patients who'd followed a strict low-fat diet for over a decade come in with worsening brain fog and shown a genuinely low omega-3 index on blood work. Reintroducing real fat, extra virgin olive oil, wild salmon a couple times a week, a daily handful of walnuts has, in my own clinical experience, made a real noticeable difference within a couple of months for more than one of them. Include a source of healthy fat at every meal: olive oil, avocado, nuts, seeds, fatty fish. Your brain is hungry for this fuel. Stop starving it. I know this will be hard to hear, because for many of you, the television has become a companion at bedtime. It fills the silence. It feels comforting, but what it's doing to your sleep architecture after 60 is worth understanding, and once you do, you'll want to change this tonight. The screen emits blue spectrum light that directly suppresses melatonin production. Melatonin isn't just a sleep hormone, it's one of the body's more potent antioxidants, and it plays a role in DNA repair that happens largely during deep sleep. When blue light suppresses it, you don't just fall asleep later, you fall into a shallower, more fragmented version of sleep that doesn't do its job as well. Research on older adults sleeping with a television or ambient light source on has found meaningfully higher rates of insulin resistance and elevated fasting glucose compared to those sleeping in darkness. And here's the part that surprised even me when I first read the research. Your brain has a waste clearance system called the glymphatic network, and it activates almost exclusively during deep, uninterrupted sleep. This system flushes metabolic debris out of neural tissue, including beta-amyloid proteins, the ones associated with Alzheimer's disease. When the television fragments your sleep cycles, you're not just tired the next morning, you may be letting that clearance process run less effectively, night after night. Replace the television with an audiobook or a sound machine on a timer. Keep the bedroom as dark as possible. If you need ambient sound, choose brown noise or rainfall with no light component. If total darkness feels uncomfortable, a dim red spectrum nightlight is a reasonable compromise. Red light doesn't suppress melatonin the way blue and white light do. I'm not talking about your daily exercise routine. Many of you walk, garden, stay active, and that's genuinely wonderful. I'm talking about what happens in the hours between those activities because that's where the damage quietly builds. When you sit continuously for more than about 45 minutes, your body starts to shift into a lower activity metabolic state. Blood pools in the lower legs, your largest muscle groups go quiet, and your body's ability to regulate blood sugar measurably drops within the first half hour. A substantial body of research pooling dozens of studies has found that prolonged sedentary time raises the risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and overall mortality. Independent of how much exercise a person gets during the rest of the day, you genuinely cannot fully out-exercise a day spent mostly sitting. They behave as two separate risk factors. There's a detail specific to seniors that's easy to miss too. After sitting 45 minutes or more, standing up can cause a real drop in blood pressure as your system scrambles to redistribute blood flow. This is called orthostatic hypotension, and it's a genuine, well-documented contributor to falls and fractures in adults over 65 die. So the advice below isn't just about metabolism, it's about safety. Every 30 to 40 minutes, stand up and move for 2 to 3 minutes. Walk to the kitchen, step outside, do a few standing calf raises. It doesn't need to be intense, it needs to be frequent. Set a timer and treat it as a non-negotiable appointment with your body. Pair each standing break with a glass of water, and you're addressing hydration, circulation, and metabolism in one habit. Stay with me because I'm not telling you to stop napping. A well-timed nap is genuinely restorative. But there's a real line between a nap that helps you and a nap that quietly wrecks your nighttime sleep, and the odds are decent you're on the wrong side of it without realizing. When a nap runs past about 30 minutes, your brain often descends into slow-wave deep sleep, and waking out of that stage triggers sleep inertia, that heavy, disoriented, groggy feeling that can linger for close to an hour. But the groggy hour isn't the real cost. Research on older adults has found that longer daytime naps are associated with more difficulty falling asleep at night and more nighttime awakenings, compared to shorter naps. Over time, this becomes a cycle. Poor sleep at night drives a longer nap the next day, which makes the following night worse still. I've worked with patients who'd gone years without a full night's sleep, who were napping nearly 2 hours a day out of sheer exhaustion, and who saw real, measurable improvement within weeks of switching to a single alarmed 20-minute nap before 2 post-meridiem. Cap naps at 20 minutes, set an alarm, and keep them before 2 post-meridiem. If this channel has ever told you something your own doctor never mentioned, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. It costs nothing, and it's genuinely how this information reaches more of the people who need it. This one doesn't get the attention it deserves, and the consequences are more serious than most people assume. Your auditory system doesn't just process sound, it's deeply woven into cognitive function, spatial awareness, and social connection. When hearing declines and goes unaddressed, your brain has to reallocate real resources just to decode basic speech, and that reallocation comes at the cost of memory, attention, and executive function. This part I want to say plainly because it's genuinely well established. The Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention identified hearing loss as the single largest modifiable risk factor for dementia, larger than smoking, hypertension, or physical inactivity. Research out of Johns Hopkins has found that adults with even mild, untreated hearing loss carry a substantially higher risk of developing dementia over the following decade, and that risk climbs with severity. Here's the mechanism that ties it together. When you can't hear well, you withdraw. Conversations get exhausting. You stop stop going to gatherings. You pull back from the people and activities that kept your brain engaged, and that isolation feeds its own cycle of cognitive decline and low mood. The hearing loss doesn't just affect your ears, it reshapes your whole relationship with the people around you. Get a baseline hearing test. If you're over 60 and haven't had one in 2 years, schedule it this month. Modern hearing aids are discreet, effective, and often at least partly covered by insurance. Early intervention protects neural pathways that later intervention can't always recover. This is one of the most overlooked factors in senior health, and the biology behind it is worth understanding. Your nose isn't just an air passage, it's a filtration, humidification, and chemical production system. As air passes through the nasal cavity, the sinuses produce nitric oxide, a molecule involved in blood pressure regulation, immune defense, and oxygen absorption. Nasal breathing meaningfully improves oxygen uptake compared to mouth breathing, largely because that nitric oxide helps blood vessels in the lungs work more efficiently. Research on habitual mouth breathers has found higher rates of disordered breathing during sleep, along with somewhat elevated blood pressure and slightly reduced blood oxygen levels compared to nasal breathers. For seniors, these effects compound. Lower oxygen means less fuel for the brain. Higher blood pressure means more strain on an aging cardiovascular system. And there's a connection that gets missed entirely. Habitual mouth breathing dries out the mouth, reducing saliva, your primary defense against bacterial overgrowth, and chronic dry mouth in seniors is linked to faster tooth decay, gum disease, and a higher risk of aspiration pneumonia, a genuinely serious and common cause of hospitalization in adults over 70. Check in with yourself hourly during the day. Are your lips together? Are you breathing through your nose? If mouth breathings become habitual, practice 5 minutes of deliberate nasal breathing 3 times a day. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 2, out through the nose for 6. Within 3 to 4 weeks, the habit tends to retrain itself. If nasal congestion is the barrier, that's worth a visit to your doctor. It's usually treatable, and the downstream benefit is substantial. The single daily habit nearly every senior in this country practices inside their own home all year long, that's quietly working against their metabolism, cardiovascular resilience, and brain function. That habit is keeping your home consistently warm, above roughly 72 degrees Fahrenheit every day, all year round. Your body has a tissue called brown fat. Unlike white fat, which stores energy, brown fat burns energy to generate heat, and it plays a real role in blood sugar regulation and metabolic rate. Research on cold exposure and metabolic health, some of it funded by the NIH, has found that spending time in mildly cool environments, somewhere around 66 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, can measurably increase brown fat activity in adults over weeks, along with modest improvements in insulin sensitivity. Interestingly, these effects appear even in older adults whose brown fat reserves are smaller but still responsive. There's a cardiovascular angle here too. When your home stays perpetually warm, your circulatory system never has to work to regulate your core temperature. That sounds like comfort, but it's mild deconditioning. Some thermal variation trains your blood vessels to dilate and constrict efficiently, keeping that regulatory system engaged. Some research has found older adults living with modest temperature variation tend to show slightly lower resting heart rates than those in constantly warm environments. I do want to add one honest caveat here because this is the one piece of advice in this video I'd want you to apply carefully rather than aggressively. This is about mild variation, not a cold house. If you have circulation problems, are on medications that affect temperature regulation, or have limited mobility to add layers when you're cold, talk to your doctor before making a significant change. Frailty and cold exposure is a genuine safety consideration in a way none of the other 6 habits are. A degree or 2 of difference, a light sweater instead of blasting the heat, is the goal here, not discomfort. If it's medically appropriate for you, try keeping your home a few degrees cooler than you're used to, somewhere in the high 60s during the day, cooler at night, and add a light layer rather than raising the thermostat. Pair it with morning movement if you can, since the combination tends to compound. This is about more than biology and research. This is about your life, about whether the next 10 years feel like something that happens to you or something you shape with your own hands. In 20 years of practice, I've watched patients in their late 80s reverse conditions they were told were permanent. I've watched people afraid to walk to the mailbox become daily walkers within months. In almost every case, the turning point wasn't a medication or a procedure. It was information, applied consistently, one change at a time. You now have 7 of those changes. None of them cost anything, none of them require a prescription, and every single one of them can start today. Your body isn't failing you, it's responding to the signals it's been given. Change the signals, and I think you'll be genuinely surprised by what this body of yours still has the capacity to do. If this reached you at the right time, send it to someone you love who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your invitation. New research grounded content every week for adults over 60 who refuse to believe decline is the only option.